Hi all, I'm Ryan. Welcome back to my garage. So today we're going to be trying to fix a treadmill. It's my neighbour's, it partially works. I've never looked at one before. I don't know how they work, but let's look at it together and see if we can fix it. Hi, we got a Confidence Fitness Treadmill. It's complete with a single exception of a cover that's been removed to expose the motors and power supply. Everything looks complete. It certainly works from a perspective of if we push start, gives a countdown. So you see it's operating, it's moving, it's travelling at a steady 3 kilometres an hour. If I walk on it, it seems to work. We increase the pace. It works at a walk. At the moment we try and jog. You can't use it. So having seen the problem, I think there's a few obvious candidates. Potentially power supply, not actually providing the correct voltage to the motor, although the motor does appear to turn when it's not under particular load. We have the motor itself, possibly at fault. Now this is something that the owner believed might be the issue and has in fact purchased a replacement motor. Potentially this drive belt here. If this is slipping, it doesn't feel particularly loose, but there's potentially this drive belt here. It doesn't feel particularly loose, but that might be the issue. I'm not feeling any contamination or any issues there. Or the main running belt itself. Now, one obvious point is that it requires lubrication underneath it where it makes contact with a solid board. That has been done. So I'm going to try and induce the problem and see if we can see which component is the most likely cause. So, having looked back at that footage, the main running belt is stopping. That's forcing this pulley to stop, but the belt appears to be slipping against the motor. So I'm trying to understand why that might be the case, and I'm trying to see if the tension's correct or if there's any damage or contamination on this belt. So having looked carefully, it seems to me that this motor, which is held on by some bolts underneath, isn't square on the rig. So I'm wondering if there's movement adjustment from slackening off these bolts, and if there is, have they come loose as the motor moves slightly, causing the tension to drop off of this pulley, of this belt. I think I'm going to try slacking off these and see what that offers me. The motor was just held on by 4 13mm bolts. Now the holes are not elongated, there is no obvious adjustment there, other than the fact that when you put the bolts in, there's quite a bit of space movement on the bottom of the bracket itself. So the only tightening I can see that's possible would be just to pull the motor back and then just tighten the bolts accordingly. The belt looks clean, it looks in good condition. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to try cleaning it off with some brake cleaner, give it a good spray down, give it a good wipe, just make sure there's no contamination that's just causing it to slip, and then we'll try putting the motor back in, adjusting the tension, see if that makes any difference. pulleys on the motor as well. Okay. Well, we'll give that a little time to dry off. One thing I've just noticed, interestingly, is I was just trying to turn this belt by hand, and it seems particularly stiff. So, ignoring what the motor's trying to overcome, I think I'm going to try adjusting the tension on the belt, which I understand is done at the other end, and see how that feels. So on this end of the belt, there's a couple of recessed hex keys that I can turn, so I'll give it a bit of a turn, and the same this side. Let's try adjusting that now. See how difficult that is to rotate. Okay, that feels easier. Question is, will it slip? So I've begun the reassembly. These bolts are just in very loose at the moment. The only one I've done up vaguely tight is this one here, so that I've got a pivot point to actually move the motor on. We can see some movement clearly. So I've also moved the belt. I've moved the belt further inwards because I figured that it would reduce the tension, reduce the pressure on the end of this motor. The further out it is, the more strain it's going to be putting on the bearings. So I've moved it further in towards the motor to try and remove that strain, or reduce it slightly. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to find a way to put something in here to tension the belt, and then with that under tension I'm going to try tightening those bolts up. So let's find something to tension it with. So trying to find a way to tension this belt. There was nowhere easy to pry on. So trying to find a way to tension this belt, there was nowhere easy to pry on. So what I've done is I've just attached just a little bit of rope around the actual motor itself. Got a lever which I'm just putting under the frame at the back, and by just putting my pressure down on here, by just pushing on the lever, that's applying tension, which you can see is tightening the belt. So what I'm going to do now with 3 hands is just apply some gentle pressure onto this rope whilst tightening the 4 bolts up. And that should apply a certain amount of pressure to the belt, and then we'll give that a try. So that's now back together. The belt is further inside, as I mentioned, and the motor is now perfectly secure. The belt feels similar sort of tightness to what it did before, although I was pulling back on the motor when I tightened up the mountings. So I think it's time for a quick test, see if that's improved the situation at all. So let's give this a try. Okay, so we go for 3 kilometres now. By 6. Okay, so far so good, feels okay. Let's try 9. Still experiencing the same problem. did not solve it. So one thing I'm going to check is exactly what we got under here. Just removed a couple of screws from this cover, which okay, so that's quite straightforward. So the bolts that I was adjusting are on a thread which literally pulls the roller backwards and forwards. So I'm going to just try adjusting this tension a bit further and making sure that all these are lubricated so they're turning nice and freely. So we're definitely making progress. It's improving. The belt is tighter. The actual running surface itself I've loosened off. So I've slackened these off a bit. It feels easier to turn by hand. And I think that's improved the situation. It's still biting a little, so I think the next stage is to try using some of this treadmill oil. I've just looked online, and apparently we don't need to drizzle a little bit up here towards the front of the belt, sort of lift this, put a line in there, a line in here, and then work it in, run the belt for a few minutes, walk gently on it, see if that makes a difference. So we will see. Okay, so it's now okay, so I've lubricated the belt using the silicone oil, and just going to give it a quick test now, see if there's any noticeable difference. So far, feels good. Pick it up. All good so far? Okay, so it's beginning to break up. So definitely improved, but at the higher speed still catching slightly. I'm going to try tightening the belt any more, and also tightening the adjusters on the end here. So I've readjusted the tension on the belt. I've re-lubricated it with the silicone oil, making sure that the oil goes right to the front of the pad so that there's no catching, gripping at the front of this. This is now running, it feels smoother, it sounds quieter. If you actually give it a quick try. You still very, very slightly hear the catching occasionally. Good. Cool. So that's me finished for today. I think it's very much improved. I'm not 100% sure it's perfect. It still seems to bite occasionally, just at the higher speeds, but it's definitely usable now, and for that I'm pleased. So thank you very much for spending some time with me today. I look forward to seeing you again soon. Please like and subscribe to this video, and I'll see you next time. Thanks.